For the first time in history, humanity was not looking up at the stars with wonder. They were standing among them. Humanity had always been restless. From the first fire lit in a dark cave, to the sails that carried explorers across vast oceans, to the rockets that pierced Earth's skies, the pattern was the same. Move forward, claim the unknown, survive at all costs. By the dawn of the 23rd century, Earth was no longer just Earth. It was the beating heart of a civilization that stretched from the oceans of home to the red deserts of Mars, the carved tunnels of Luna, and the metallic skeletons of stations orbiting in the black. The United Nations of Space, UNS, had risen out of necessity. Old nations realized that in the vacuum of space, borders meant nothing. No single government could claim the void. Humanity, for once, chose unity over division. Wars on Earth became rare, almost unthinkable, as the focus shifted outward. Industry bloomed on Mars. Asteroid mining filled the coffers of corporations richer than entire countries. Families were born on Luna who had never seen a blue sky. Humanity was learning to breathe beyond the cradle. Yet, beneath the triumph, there was unease. Expansion came with cost, colonists dying of radiation storms, mining accidents leaving thousands entombed in rock, entire stations going dark when supplies failed. Still, the human spirit endured. People whispered that this was the beginning of a new age of exploration, one to rival the days of wooden ships and iron empires. But unlike the oceans, the stars had no maps, no guarantees. Children in Martian classrooms learned not just history, but orbital mechanics, survival in vacuum, and how to patch a failing pressure suit in under a minute. Humanity was training an entire generation not to live on Earth, but to live anywhere. It was bold, reckless, and, if critics were honest, terrifying. But this was the human way. And then came the signals. At first, they were dismissed: random radio static, natural pulsars, the whisper of cosmic background radiation. But patterns emerged. Too clean, too deliberate. Mathematicians recognized sequences of primes buried in the noise. Engineers confirmed it was no trick of equipment. Something, or someone, was transmitting across the Gulf of Stars. The UNS council chambers buzzed with excitement and fear. Politicians declared it a new dawn. Scientists spoke of dialogue, discovery, and friendship. Soldiers, however, wondered, what if the senders were not friendly? For the first time, humanity stood united under the vast silence of space, staring at an invitation, or a warning, etched in light years. They had reached the stars, but they were no longer alone. It began as a whisper in the static, too precise to be an accident, too alien to be human. The first confirmed detection came from a forgotten observatory on the far side of the moon. The station was old, its funding barely enough to keep the lights on, but its sensors had a clear view of the stars, free from Earth's noisy atmosphere. On an otherwise routine night, a junior technician named Aria Velasquez noticed something strange, a repeating pulse buried deep in the background hum of the cosmos. At first, she thought it was interference, perhaps a solar flare, or another glitch in the aging equipment. But the sequence repeated, and repeated again. The pulses were not random. They carried the elegance of mathematics, prime numbers, echoed in clean, deliberate rhythms. Aria's hands shook as she recorded the pattern, triple-checking her instruments. The next day, the data was confirmed by telescopes on Mars, then by orbital stations circling Earth. Within weeks, there was no doubt left. Humanity had received its first message from the stars. The United Nations of Space called an emergency session. Representatives from Earth's great powers, Martian city-states, lunar settlements, and the vast mining corporations gathered in the largest assembly humanity had ever held. The chamber buzzed with energy that bordered on hysteria. To some, it was proof of destiny. We are not alone. The universe has answered us. To others, it was a threat. After all, no one sends a message across light years without a reason. On the streets of Earth and Mars, the news spread faster than any government could control. People cheered in plazas, holding banners that declared first contact. Religious groups proclaimed the signal as divine proof, while doomsayers whispered of annihilation. Children pointed at the stars with wide eyes, asking questions no parent could answer. Humanity's imagination exploded overnight, torn between wonder and terror. Scientists worked frantically to decode the signal, but beyond its mathematical introduction, the meaning remained hidden. Was it a greeting? A warning? A map? Some even argued it was a test, a knock at the door, waiting to see if we would answer. But not everyone wanted to answer. Military advisors urged caution, pointing out that broadcasting humanity's position in the galaxy might be dangerous. Historians reminded the Council of what usually happened when advanced civilizations met less advanced ones: colonization, conquest, or extinction. The shadows of Earth's past hung heavy over its future. Still, the momentum was unstoppable. For the first time in its history, humanity had proof that it was not alone. Whether the senders were friends or enemies did not matter yet. What mattered was that the silence of the universe had been broken. And somewhere, across the cold distance of space, someone was listening. When the ship appeared, it was as though the stars themselves had been rearranged. It came without warning. No fleet, no barrage of weapons, no subtle announcement, just a ripple of distortion in the black near Jupiter's orbit. And then the ship, larger than anything humanity had ever built. It hung in space like a mountain carved of obsidian and light, its surface shifting with impossible geometry. Every telescope and sensor across the solar system turned toward it. Humanity's first encounter was not through a handshake, but through awe. The United Nations of space convened in chaos. Half the council demanded immediate communication attempts, while others insisted on raising planetary defenses. Civilian broadcasts were jammed to prevent panic, but rumors spread faster than official reports. On Mars, colonists huddled in domes, staring upward, whispering prayers. On Earth, cities erupted into both celebration and fear. Children drew pictures of aliens in chalk on the streets. Soldiers polished rifles they suspected would be useless. Contact began with light. The alien vessel emitted beams of structured radiation, patterns nearly identical to the earlier signal that had reached humanity weeks before. This time, though, there was more: fractals, shifting sequences, even crude images formed from particles of light. It was not speech, not as humans knew it, but it was unmistakably a language. A team of the greatest minds, linguists, mathematicians, AI systems, labored around the clock to interpret. Slowly, words took shape. Slowly, meaning began to emerge. The message was simple yet profound. We see you. We know you are here. We come to speak. The UNS chose its response carefully. A transmission was prepared from Earth orbit, voiced in dozens of languages, encoded with human music, images of Earth, DNA sequences, and mathematical constants. It was a gift, an introduction, and a declaration. We are humanity. We wish to understand. But even as the message was sent, doubts festered. Military officials noted that the alien ship's position near Jupiter was strategic, perfectly placed to monitor or strike at both Earth and Mars. Others argued that no species capable of crossing light years would fear humanity's fledgling fleets. The aliens had not come in secret. They had come openly, confidently, as though certain that humans posed no threat. When the reply came, it was more direct than anyone expected. The alien vessel deployed a shuttle, sleek, silver, and impossibly fast. It entered Earth's orbit with precision that mocked human engineering and descended toward Geneva, the beating heart of the UNS. The council chamber, fortified and crowded with leaders, shook as the craft landed outside. For a moment, no one breathed. Cameras rolled. Soldiers stood with weapons ready. The hatch of the shuttle hissed open. Humanity's first true meeting with another intelligence had begun. Wars do not always begin with armies. Sometimes they begin with a single shot, fired in fear. The arrival of the alien delegation should have been a triumph. Humanity had prepared for this moment with ceremonies, speeches, and endless rehearsals. The shuttle that touched down in Geneva gleamed like liquid silver, its surface alive with shifting colors. World leaders watched from balconies, flanked by guards in ceremonial armor and soldiers in hidden bunkers. Billions of eyes across Earth, Mars, and Luna followed the live broadcast, breath held in collective suspense. When the hatch opened, silence fell. They emerged tall and strange, their forms draped in translucent membranes, that shimmered in Earth's atmosphere. Their faces were unreadable, angular ridges of bone or chitin, eyes like pools of molten gold. They carried no weapons, only rods that pulsed with faint blue light. Every step was measured, deliberate, as though each movement was part of a ritual. The UNS interpreters struggled to bridge the gap between human and alien language. The first words were fractured, strained, but understandable. "We young. You not ready." The aliens introduced themselves as the Karel Dominion, a power that claimed dominion over hundreds of star systems. They spoke of guidance, of protection, and of tribute. To them, humanity was not an equal partner. It was a child species, fragile and reckless, that needed oversight. The council chamber bristled. Politicians demanded clarity. Scientists asked questions. Military leaders clenched their fists. But it was when the Karel envoy placed its hand upon the Earth's flag, tilting its head as if inspecting a curiosity, that the spark was struck. A guard, nervous and trembling, mistook the gesture for mockery. He raised his weapon. The shot was deafening. The alien envoy staggered back, its translucent skin burning where the plasma bolt struck. Chaos erupted. Human guards surged forward, half trying to protect, half ready to kill. The Karel bodyguards reacted instantly, their rods crackling with energy that sent soldiers sprawling. In seconds, the council chamber became a battlefield. Screams echoed. Broadcasts cut to static. The envoy survived, but the damage was irreversible. The Karel considered the shot an assassination attempt, an insult that could not be ignored. Their ship in orbit shifted position, its weapons glowing ominously against the void. Humanity scrambled to explain, to apologize, but their words rang hollow. The first meeting had ended not in partnership, but in blood. By dawn, the solar system was ablaze with fear. The UNS declared a state of emergency. Fleets scrambled to defend Mars and Luna. Civilians hoarded supplies, expecting the worst. And above them all, the alien warship drifted in silence, patient and unyielding. The first spark had been lit. The fire of humanity's first galactic war was inevitable. They thought humanity would break. Instead, humanity began to rise. The gunshot in Geneva was still echoing through history when the first Karel ultimatum arrived. Their message was blunt and merciless: surrender sovereignty, submit to their guidance, and pay tribute or face eradication. The transmission was broadcast across every human colony, not as negotiation but as domination. To the Karel, it was unthinkable that a young, fragile species might resist. They had seen countless civilizations absorbed into their dominion. They expected humanity to kneel. Instead, humanity stood. In the wake of the chaos, the United Nations of Space, UNS, declared a state of full mobilization. Old rivalries between Earth's nations, Martian city-states, and lunar corporations were set aside. "We are one species," the Secretary-General declared in a trembling but resolute voice. "We will endure, or we will fall together." Her words became the rallying cry of a generation. Factories on Mars that once built mining drones shifted overnight to constructing warships. Lunar foundries poured steel and composites into orbital shipyards. Earth's universities were emptied as scientists, engineers, and students volunteered their talents. Even the poorest colonies, often neglected by Earth, pledged their resources. For the first time in recorded history, humanity acted not as fractured nations, but as a single people preparing for survival. The first fleets were laughably small compared to the Dominion's armadas, retrofit cargo freighters armed with railguns, patrol vessels reinforced with scavenged armor, and old orbital stations turned into makeshift fortresses. Yet there was a fire in the human spirit that could not be measured in tonnage or firepower. Volunteers flooded recruitment offices, so many that ships could not carry them all. Veterans of Earth's last wars trained raw recruits, passing down tactics older than spaceflight, guerrilla strikes, ambushes, and the principle of fighting dirty. Alien analysts, watching from orbit, dismissed these efforts as futile. They had crushed stronger species with ease. To them, humanity's defiance was not bravery, it was foolishness. But what they failed to understand was this: humans had never learned how to give up. Survival was not just instinct, it was heritage. In cities across Earth, Murals of resistance bloomed overnight. On Mars, children painted slogans across domes. No chains among the stars. Songs were written, broadcasts spread, and in every corner of the solar system, the same words were whispered. Let them come. The Karel believed they had encountered another weak species, easily conquered. What they had truly encountered was a force they had never faced before, an enemy that would fight with every breath, every resource, and every ounce of desperation. Humanity was rallying, and the galaxy was about to learn what that meant. The first battle of the First Galactic War was not won. It was survived. The Karel did not wait long. Within weeks of the Geneva incident, their warship in orbit sent a signal back into the void. Days later, the First Dominion fleet arrived, a formation of sleek, jagged ships that blotted out the stars. Their weapons gleamed like fragments of suns, and their shields shimmered with energy fields humanity could scarcely comprehend. To them, this was not war. It was a demonstration. The UNS High Command scrambled to meet the threat. Every ship humanity could muster, retrofit freighters, newly built corvettes, even mining tugs reinforced with armor plates, was ordered to assemble near Ceres, the asteroid belt's largest hub. Admiral Rourke, a grizzled veteran of Earth's last wars, took command of a fleet that was outnumbered and outgunned 10-1. His orders were simple: hold the line as long as possible. When the Karel fleet arrived, silence fell across every human comm channel. The Dominion ships moved with terrifying precision, their formations perfect, their weapons glowing like dawn on the horizon. Against them, humanity's fleet looked like scrap metal drifting in space. Yet when the order came, every human vessel answered with fire. The opening salvos were catastrophic. Karel energy lances sliced through human hulls as if they were paper. Whole ships disintegrated in blinding flashes. Screams filled comms before static swallowed them. Still, the humans fought. Freighters charged forward, ramming Dominion cruisers. Mining ships hurled rocks and molten ore, makeshift weapons born of desperation. A squadron of corvettes darted through the enemy's shields, their rail guns spitting tungsten slugs until they were vaporized. Admiral Rourke's flagship, the Resolute, stayed at the center of the storm. Hold them, he growled over open comms, voice steady even as the bridge shook around him. If we break, humanity breaks. Stand your ground. His words carried across the fleet, a lifeline in the chaos. Against all expectation, the Karel began to falter, not because they were losing, but because they were unprepared for the ferocity of their enemy. Dominion doctrine was built on overwhelming force and submission. They had never faced prey that bit back, prey that turned every loss into another reason to fight harder. Human tactics were unpredictable, reckless, even suicidal. But they worked. By the time the Dominion withdrew, a third of humanity's fleet was gone, reduced to glowing wreckage, drifting in the void. Entire squadrons had been annihilated. Yet Ceres still stood. Humanity had not been destroyed. The battle was no victory, but neither was it the swift extinction the Karel had promised. For the first time, the Dominion hesitated, and for the first time, the galaxy realized humanity could not be crushed so easily. To the Dominion, war was a science. To humanity, it was survival, and survival made them dangerous. After the slaughter at Ceres, the Karel expected humanity to collapse. In their long history of conquest, no species had endured such losses and continued to resist. Most bent the knee after a single defeat. But humanity was different. The survivors of Ceres did not return broken. They returned burning with purpose. Admiral Rourke and his commanders realized a bitter truth. Humanity could not win an open battle. The Dominion's fleets were too vast, their technology too advanced. But humans had never relied on strength alone. What they lacked in numbers, they made up for with creativity, audacity, and sheer recklessness. If war was a chess match, humanity refused to play by the rules. The first strikes were small. A squadron of corvettes used asteroid shadows to ambush a Dominion patrol, disabling their engines with improvised EMP mines. On Mars, engineers modified civilian shuttles into kamikaze drones, packed with explosives and guided by volunteers. A lunar mining crew turned their drilling lasers into weapons, slicing a Dominion supply ship apart before vanishing into a dust storm. The Karel were furious. Their doctrines demanded order and precision, yet every encounter with humans devolved into chaos. Dominion captains reported ships that attacked from suicidal angles, crews that fought even after their hulls were breached, soldiers who laughed in the face of death. To the Karel, humans were not soldiers. They were predators, unpredictable and terrifying. Soon, stories spread across the Dominion fleets. Rumors of humans who fought without oxygen for precious minutes. Tales of captured humans who bit and clawed their way free from restraints. Entire Dominion squadrons began requesting reinforcements before engaging, fearful of what these primitives might attempt next. Admiral Rourke leaned into the chaos, crafting a doctrine of unpredictability. "If they expect us to run, we charge," he told his captains. "If they expect us to charge, we vanish. Keep them guessing. Fear will win battles our guns cannot." His words became scripture for the fleet. One of the most infamous raids was led by Commander Aria Velasquez, the same woman who had first detected the alien signal. She guided a flotilla of disguised mining barges into a Dominion fuel depot, detonating the station with its own volatile reserves. The explosion lit the void like a second sun, destroying half a fleet without a single human warship firing a shot. The Dominion called it dishonorable. Humans called it victory. By the war's third month, Dominion High Command was unsettled. They had expected conquest. Instead, they faced a nightmare that bled them with every encounter. Humanity had earned a new name whispered in fear across Karel fleets, the Unpredictables. Every war has a moment when the tide shifts. For humanity, it came not with numbers, but with will. By the fourth month of the war, the solar system was a graveyard of wreckage. Whole fleets had been shattered. Colonies bore scars of orbital bombardments. Yet still, humanity refused to yield. The Dominion had underestimated its prey, and now their fleets were stretched thin, harassed by raids that drained resources and morale. But what humanity needed was more than defiance. They needed a victory, something undeniable, something that would prove they could fight not only to survive, but to win. That chance came at Titan. Titan's methane-rich atmosphere made it a key refueling hub for human fleets. The Dominion sought to seize it as a forward base to cut Earth off from its outer colonies. A massive fleet descended, expecting another swift conquest. What they found instead was humanity's most daring defense yet, led by Admiral Elias Rourke, now a living legend among his people. Rourke had studied every Dominion engagement, dissecting their strategies, their rigid formations, their reliance on overwhelming firepower. Where the Karel trusted doctrine, he trusted chaos. He lured them into Titan's thick orange haze, where sensors faltered and visibility was near zero. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, darted through the clouds like hunters in a jungle. The battle was brutal. Dominion warships fired blind, energy lances scorching the atmosphere and igniting methane storms. Human corvettes struck from the clouds, vanishing before counterfire could land. Modified shuttles dropped mines disguised as ice chunks, crippling enemy cruisers. Titan itself became a weapon, the environment and ally humanity wielded with lethal cunning. Midway through the battle, the Dominion attempted to regroup. That was when Rourke unleashed his final gamble. From Titan's surface, hidden launch bays opened, releasing swarms of drone fighters, once mining craft, now weaponized with rail cannons. They rose from the methane seas, like a plague of metal locusts, tearing into the already disoriented Dominion fleet. The tide turned. For the first time, the Dominion suffered catastrophic losses. A flagship was destroyed, its wreckage burning across Titan skies like a second sun. Human soldiers watching from the colonies cheered as the impossible unfolded before them. The Dominion retreated, abandoning Titan, leaving behind hundreds of destroyed ships. News of the victory spread across every colony and city. On Mars, crowds filled the domes chanting Rourke's name. On Luna, children painted murals of Titan's burning skies. For the first time since the war began, hope outweighed fear. The Dominion had learned a lesson they had not expected. Humanity could not only resist, they could win. And from that day forward, Titan was remembered not as a battle, but as the turning point. The Dominion thought time was on their side. They did not understand how long humanity could endure. The victory at Titan electrified humanity. For the first time since the war began, the word hope replaced fear. But hope did not end battles, and it certainly did not end wars. The Kal-El Dominion, humiliated but not broken, responded with fury. They poured reinforcements into the solar system, determined to crush the upstart species that had dared to wound them. Thus began the long grind, the war of attrition. Dominion fleets laid siege to human colonies across the asteroid belt. Supply convoys were hunted relentlessly. Mars endured orbital bombardments that turned whole districts into glass. Luna's tunnels collapsed under shock waves that shook the very crust. Yet humanity held on. Every destroyed city became a rallying cry. Every atrocity fuel for resistance. Admiral Rourke's forces could not match the Dominion ship for ship, but they could bleed them. And bleed them they did. Guerrilla strikes multiplied. Mining colonies became fortresses. Even civilian vessels joined the fight, their crews arming themselves with whatever they could wield. Every ship a weapon, Rourke declared, and the people believed him. The Kal-El began to learn an uncomfortable truth. Humans fought differently. Where Dominion soldiers surrendered when cut off, humans clawed and bit until their last breath. Where other species feared losses, humans endured them, adapted, and came back stronger. Casualties mounted, yet recruitment never faltered. In fact, the worse the losses, the more determined humans became. Months dragged into years. Entire generations on Luna and Mars knew nothing but war. Children grew up hearing the names of battles as if they were lullabies. Ceres, Titan, Europa. Artists painted murals of wrecked Dominion ships, drifting lifeless through the void. Songs carried across the colonies. We bleed, we burn, we fight. Humanity was no longer only surviving. They were transforming. War was reshaping them into something harder, fiercer, unyielding. The Dominion, too, was changing. Their admirals grew cautious, their captains hesitant. Reports spoke of soldiers who flinched at the mention of humans, who whispered ghost stories of enemies that fought in vacuum without suits, who laughed as they died. The word human began to spread across their fleets not as a description, but as a warning. Neither side could claim victory, yet neither side would stop. The Dominion had numbers. Humanity had will. Every day was a grinding stalemate, each side trying to exhaust the other. But exhaustion was something humanity had mastered long ago. From trenches, from deserts, from oceans, they had learned to outlast. And now, across the stars, they were teaching that lesson again. The war was not over. The war was only deepening. Sometimes victory does not come from strength, but from the refusal to die quietly. By the third year of the war, humanity was bleeding. Entire fleets had been lost, colonies reduced to ash, and Earth itself was scarred from orbital strikes. The Kal-El Dominion believed the war was nearly won, just a matter of time before humanity's stubborn resistance collapsed. But the UNS High Command and Admiral Rourke knew the truth. If humanity stayed on the defensive, they would be ground into extinction. So they chose the unthinkable. The plan was desperate, almost suicidal. Strike deep into Dominion territory, at the heart of their supply lines. Humanity had never taken the war beyond the solar system. Now, they would carry the fight to the Kal-El themselves. It was not a strategy of conquest, but of survival. The Dominion had to believe humans were too dangerous to eradicate. The fleet that assembled was a patchwork of survivors, battle-scarred warships, converted freighters. Even half-finished prototypes rushed from the shipyards. Crews volunteered, knowing they might never return. Families said goodbyes that felt final. Yet morale was fierce. Across Earth, Mars, and Luna, broadcasts repeated the same message. This is our stand. If we fall forward. The chosen target was a Dominion fuel nexus orbiting a dying star, an essential hub feeding their fleets in the solar system. Without it, the Dominion's invasion would stall. To strike it, humanity would have to jump through contested systems, past patrols, into the jaws of a superpower. Rourke's fleet went anyway. The battle was chaos from the start. Dominion defenses were overwhelming, their ships sleek and disciplined. But humans turned the void into madness. Cargo ships disgorged swarms of drones, kamikaze craft rammed cruisers, and railgun slugs tore through engines before detonating fuel reserves. Rourke unleashed every trick, every deception, every ounce of unpredictability his species had mastered. Then came the gambit that defined the war. A contingent of human ships, already crippled, plunged directly into the fuel nexus itself. Their reactors were overloaded manually, crews staying aboard to guide the doomed vessels. The resulting detonation was cataclysmic. The nexus erupted in a chain reaction, a sunbright explosion that shattered Dominion reinforcements and sent shockwaves across the system. Half of Rourke's fleet was gone, thousands of lives sacrificed. But when the fires dimmed, the nexus was destroyed. Humanity had struck the Dominion, where they believed themselves untouchable. The message was clear: eradicate us if you can, but we will take you with us. And for the first time, the Kal-El Dominion hesitated to continue the war. The Dominion came to break humanity's body. Instead, they broke upon humanity's will. The destruction of the fuel nexus sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. Dominion fleets reeled as their supply lines collapsed. For the first time in centuries, the Kal-El Dominion, a galactic empire that had crushed countless civilizations, found itself on the defensive. And all because of a species they had considered barely out of its cradle. But humanity was not celebrating. The cost of the attack was staggering. Half of Rourke's fleet had been lost in fire and silence. Whole crews sacrificed in suicide detonations. Mars mourned thousands of its sons and daughters. On Luna, widows and orphans filled the tunnels. Yet grief hardened into resolve. The sacrifices had not been meaningless. The Dominion could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could be forced to stop. The UNS ordered one last push, a coordinated assault to drive the Kal-El out of the solar system. It was a gamble as desperate as any before. Humanity had neither the numbers nor the technology for a true victory. But they had earned something far more dangerous: fear. The final battle began near Earth itself. A Dominion fleet, reinforced and furious, launched an all-out strike to avenge the loss of their nexus. They expected a cornered enemy, ready for extermination. Instead, they found madness. Human ships did not retreat, they charged. Crippled destroyers rammed capital ships, their dying reactors exploding in blinding flashes. Swarms of drone fighters, cobbled together from scrap, harassed the flanks like angry hornets. Entire squadrons feigned surrender, only to detonate hidden warheads once boarded. The Dominion's perfect formations crumbled. Their doctrine had no answer for chaos, no counter to enemies who turned every defeat into a weapon. Admirals who had once dismissed humans as primitives now stared in disbelief as their fleets disintegrated under a storm of audacity. At the center of it all was Admiral Rourke aboard the Resolute. With shields failing and hull breaches across the decks, he ordered his flagship into the heart of the Dominion Armada. Railguns thundered until barrels glowed white. Missiles streaked like meteors. When the Resolute finally fell silent, the Dominion flagship lay in ruins beside it. The sight broke them. For the first time in living memory, the Kal-El Dominion retreated, not regrouping, not maneuvering, but fleeing. Humanity had done the impossible. They had survived the wrath of an empire. Across Earth, Mars, and Luna, tears flowed with the cheers. Humanity had not won by strength of arms, but by strength of will, by a refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed certain. They had forced the Dominion to recognize a truth written in fire. Humans were not prey. Humans were predators, and the galaxy would never forget it. The Dominion came to break humanity's body. Instead, they broke upon humanity's will. The destruction of the fuel nexus sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. Dominion fleets reeled as their supply lines collapsed. For the first time in centuries, the Kal-El Dominion, a galactic empire that had crushed countless civilizations, found itself on the defensive. And all because of a species they had considered barely out of its cradle. But humanity was not celebrating. The cost of the attack was staggering. Half of Rourke's fleet had been lost in fire and silence. Whole crews sacrificed in suicide detonations. Mars mourned thousands of its sons and daughters. On Luna, widows and orphans filled the tunnels. Yet grief hardened into resolve. The sacrifices had not been meaningless. The Dominion could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could be forced to stop. The UNS ordered one last push, a coordinated assault to drive the Kal-El out of the solar system. It was a gamble as desperate as any before. Humanity had neither the numbers nor the technology for a true victory, but they had earned something far more dangerous: fear. The final battle began near Earth itself. A Dominion fleet, reinforced and furious, launched an all-out strike to avenge the loss of their nexus. They expected a cornered enemy, ready for extermination. Instead, they found madness. Human ships did not retreat, they charged. Crippled destroyers rammed capital ships, their dying reactors exploding in blinding flashes. Swarms of drone fighters, cobbled together from scrap, harassed the flanks like angry hornets. Entire squadrons feigned surrender, only to detonate hidden warheads once boarded. The Dominion's perfect formations crumbled. Their doctrine had no answer for chaos, no counter to enemies who turned every defeat into a weapon. Admirals who had once dismissed humans as primitives now stared in disbelief as their fleets disintegrated under a storm of audacity. At the center of it all was Admiral Rourke aboard the Resolute. With shields failing and hull breaches across the decks, he ordered his flagship into the heart of the Dominion Armada. Railguns thundered until barrels glowed white. Missiles streaked like meteors. When the Resolute finally fell silent, the Dominion flagship lay in ruins beside it. The sight broke them. For the first time in living memory, the Kal-El Dominion retreated, not regrouping, not maneuvering, but fleeing. Humanity had done the impossible. They had survived the wrath of an empire. Across Earth, Mars, and Luna, tears flowed with the cheers. Humanity had not won by strength of arms, but by strength of will, by a refusal to surrender even when surrender seemed certain. They had forced the Dominion to recognize a truth written in fire. Humans were not prey. Humans were predators, and the galaxy would never forget it.